This is my story. This is the story of Taisolunar. It's a girl. It's a name. I constructed the name. It will be claimed, just so you know, but it's not copyrighted. Public domain. What is it called? Open source. Taisolunar is a blend of Japanese, Spanish, and English. Um, Perceiver of the sun and moon. Her thrashing, her thrashing about awoke their serene slumber upon the high prairie glades of grass. A start that jolted them to their hoofs and drew neighs from them. Sorry, this is my own story too. Like mere animals. Up there, the name, even rearing upon his hindquarters. I'm sorry, upon her hindquarters. Let me start all over again. But without cutting this is hilarious. Her thrashing about awoke their serene slumber upon the high prairie glades of grass. A start that jolted them to their hoofs and drew neighs from them. Like mere animals, up there even rearing upon her hind quarters, they found within the calamity of the shock they had been reduced to the very most undignified characters they have ever been since assuming their roles at the end of the last age, the age of unremembering. What had just happened, or perhaps what is it, stands the better of the mysteries. It, for she had no place of origin from which to be known from, was amiss in brutal wondering, despite the chaos they could rightly observe beneath it. Within her was a great chasm from which she could find no footing. It seemed as much as her, still merely it, shock infected her audience. As they embraced reality, they too seemed to anchor her to where she is. By the time they were nuanced enough to check one another, and this way approach to investigate, it seemed to steady. Perhaps it was actually her steadying more than initiation that drew this way closer. That way, still at a precautionary distance, could make out that it was relatively a she, an old she at that. Other way was more interested in scouring the surroundings, saturated in a shame that obsessed over being seen in such a state and in such company. Up there and another way seemed to find their senses in the smallest possible distance they could muster. Ending up close enough, they could probably have outdone a gecko's toes, and just maybe they already had. Another way stated a question in the form of an answer to an unabashed question, to an unasked question that they each harbored in their silence. Is it weeping? Oh, no, sorry. It's weeping. Okay. Another way stated a question in the form of an answer to an unasked question that each harbored in their silence. It's weeping. She, I'm pretty sure, stammered softly that way. What kind of she is it? Asked other way, determining that at this point it was just the six of them about. I doubt we know yet, this way said, in between inquisitive sniffs. I can't say I've known this aroma. It doesn't seem to have ever it doesn't even seem to have a scent. She, that way reiterated haphazardly. It was something shattering. In a moment, without any beginning, her body was pierced with so much sensation she was rocked by her own reaction. And while her body was overwhelmed by experience thrashing through her somehow, her world was utter darkness. Besides her grasping for breaths, Besides her gasping for breaths that hurt her throat as much as her nerves were being bombarded, she didn't make any other sound. Beyond her reactions, a voice seemed to whisper in her, "Get out of here." But she realized she didn't know what, let alone where, here is. Every tumble and twist brought her to the same place, where was nowhere. There was nowhere, or here. The coldness was sticking to her. Something was trying to grab her, wrap around her. She couldn't bear it, but she couldn't move enough, so she stopped. Her breaths turned to sobbing, which strangely minimized the power of the sensation. All she could do was curl up, close up, hold herself, and let out this whimpering sound. It was the first word she basically spoke. She didn't know it yet, but she was as new and as old as the prairie dew of the early spring dawn upon lush blades of tall grass that, that also tormented her. She couldn't know it. Being knew. Her eyes were as ancient as the earth's womb and as dark. It wasn't that she couldn't see. It was that she couldn't. It was that she shouldn't see. None of it would have made any more sense to her even if she had. Everything was as good as nothing. It was amidst all this uncertainty that another voice told her inside that this was it. It's a moment never meant to be remembered by any living being, but it will be the only thing she has for as long as she will remember. This is it. And while her head screamed back, "What is it?" that little whisper echoed as sheer as the sensation, this agony, and her question was drowned in her first forgetting. This is it. She had just turned 13. That meant she went from wanting to be a big girl to wanting to be a woman. She had already played with her mother's makeup, turning herself into a beautiful creature whose reflection mesmerized her with what? As, passivity with activities, I don't know, but she wore mesmerized her with, I don't know what word I wrote. Accivitive, accivitus, accivitus, accivitus. I don't know, but she never wore makeup. Okay, her mesmerized her with something, but she never wore makeup. She couldn't. She couldn't wait. Oh, but she never wore makeup, and she couldn't. But she couldn't wait. It always perplexed her when people told her how beautiful she was without it. How could that be true? She figured it was a lie everyone told little girls, but no real woman would fall. What no real woman would fall for. She she said someone said she was a natural beauty once. She replied, "Thank you," not sincerely, but as a marker, as proof she heard it. She thought it was the lowest of lies ever told her. Natural beauty was pictures of nature, animals. She heard it said of a horse once on the bus. That thanks was really so fake, yet taken so honestly by the liar who spewed it. She proved to herself she was more of a woman than anyone could ever see for themselves. Now she was old enough to prove it. The only thing stopping her was not having makeup. Her mother made it clear if she wanted to wear makeup, she'd have to get her own. Her mom needed it for work. She couldn't go without it, but she didn't make enough to buy the makeup she needed and enough for a little girl to play with. That beautiful creature in the mirror, when she snuck on when she snuck some on, began to tell her it was because her mother was just jealous. After all, every woman wants to be the most beautiful, otherwise she is just a dumb little girl. She was walking along a street lined with shops, one of which was the store she was determined to get her first makeup from. Her mom used makeup she never heard of or saw, but this store had all the most famous names. She recognized them since she was 9 or 10. Every one she saw go in and out was a real woman. She could tell they didn't wear makeup like her mom because she had to. They wore it because they knew they were beautiful. She was raised not to stare, not to stand there looking stupid. So even though she looked in every time she walked by, she never really looked in. She decided, this is it. She wasn't stupid. She could tell that her mother was treating her like a regular girl, telling her what she could and couldn't do, what she needed to learn, how she needed to think. She saw what she was doing to her. She saw what she was doing to her. She was trying to turn her into a slave. She learned enough to know that her mother was just like everyone else she had already learned about. Scared. As far as what she was told about being a princess, she was to act right, be married, and set an example for what a good wife and woman is to their subjects. She had other plans. What she thought and what she learned were mortal enemies. Her teachers were women who were trying to force her to be like them, subjects to men. She had no siblings, there was no prince, and her mother couldn't have any more children. Why would she give her birthright over to someone else's brother who was just born too late to do anything in his own kingdom? To be a good wife? To learn the real truth, no one is more powerful than a queen? That's why every king must have one. Her father had one, her mother. She hated her mother, and because she was so devoted to being a good queen, she hated her father. She knew her father loved. She knew her father. She knew her father loved, or at least wanted to be king more than married, more than to be her father. Why would she want that any less? She thought she could do it on her own, become a queen. She had stolen a royal bank card. It was against the law to track it in any way. They call it a white note, colorless, empty. She wasn't stupid. It wouldn't last forever, but she figured it would work for at least a year. And in that time, she would break free from being a little princess and turn herself into a queen that had no equal, no mother, and no father. Crowns aren't just transcended upon death, they are taken with the same force they are held by. I guess I should put by there. It had been 2 months into her escapade. She had done things she had never even imagined. The most powerful tool she used was her makeup. She hid she did it all herself. She knew enough to realize there's a difference between how a little girl puts on makeup to pretend to be a woman and how a woman puts on makeup to pretend to be young. She was finishing up a purchase. She shopped at mediocre stores. For one, she knew she was being looked for, and two, the quality was dull enough to give that din she needed to as cover. The cashier was bagging up her items. The register was at the front of the store, street side. She glanced outside and was caught by her own reflection. Despite the countless mirrors in the store, her reflection in the glass was mystical, magical. She could see through it, while still seeing into it. She faced it to adjust her hair, really just an excuse to become more absorbed into it, when someone stopped right on the other side and looked in. Something strange happened. Her reflection, floating over their face, over the other face, seemed more hers than her own. She sort of froze, but her eyes widened, as did the other girl and her reflection. The window seemed to not be working. She wasn't looking out, she was looking in, back at herself. When the clerk broke her gaze by thanking her for her business and handing her her things, she turned back to the window as the girl outside seemed to run away. She hurriedly took hold of her things and impulsively took pursuit at will. She didn't say anything, but followed the back of the girl's head, not sure what she was doing or why. For some reason, she was the most important thing in her life. She had to catch up. She had to see her, face to face. She had to know. As the girl was stopped by a signal, seemingly unaware she was being followed, but somehow obviously disheveled of sorts, the princess came upon her, paused, pondered, and told herself she had to do it. She had to know now. This is it. And she tapped her on the shoulder. So that's one story, just to be clear.